Hi, I'm on YouTube because I wanted to share my story of epilepsy and the challenges I've had with it. I wanted to share back with YouTube because YouTube is the place where I was able to diagnose it. Um, Started out in 2003 with elements that were kind of key markers that something was going wrong with me. So I wanted to share the story with you for people on YouTube that might be experiencing some of these things. And that you're not alone. This is where I found the solution. A lot of doctors have a hard time tracking down epilepsy. So I'm going to include a couple of videos that I took during some of my seizures that really helped show to this neurologist what was going on, because the seizures I were having were so they were very short term. They only last like a minute or two, and so it was really hard, I think, to capture that and explain it to them. And I'd seen another person on YouTube who'd done that, and that's really where I found out that I had temporal lobe epilepsy. So I'll talk through the journey that I went, just in case, because I feel like early on, if I would have known early on in the symptoms that I was having, that I would have been able to identify it. And I think one of the big things is I probably could have prevented some of the memory issues that I have today. And I definitely would have, from a psychological point of view, of spending so many years I did not knowing what was wrong with me, and just that sense of doom and just, I don't know, a better way to say it, just kind of a sense of mortality that was going through me during that period. So I've got most of it I've written down because it's a pretty long story. So if you're not interested in a long story, don't have time, that's fine. Take a look at the videos. If that's something that is ringing true to you, come back and watch me talk about the rest of the story, the journey I've been through since 2003. Somebody reading off some notes that I wrote down. So I'd say the first time I felt really unhealthy was in 2003. I was on a business trip, and just after dinner, somebody lit up a cigarette, and the smell was just instantly intolerable. I just felt nauseous. I'd never had this kind of reaction before. That night, I stayed at a hotel room, and maybe an hour or two later, I started having this intense, violent vomiting and diarrhea for, God, it must have been like 4 hours or something like that in the middle of the night. And it was so bad I went to the ER, and they put me on oxygen and rehydrated me. They couldn't really find anything out of the ordinary, so they kind of dismissed what was going on, and I did too. I mean, it was I couldn't explain it. Nothing had ever like that had ever happened to me before, and so I thought maybe it was a virus or something like that. But when I look back at it now, I think that it was probably, it was kind of like a little earthquake that was going off. For me, this is probably, if I look back at it, probably the very, very first kind of tremor of epilepsy that was happening. Since then, from 2003 to 2005, I had kind of it was almost really regular. It was like monthly spells, and they'd last about 2 to 3 days. And during this time, I'd get really fatigued. I'd have night sweats. It'd be like sweating in the night. My face would turn kind of pallor, whitish, pasty. I'd smell things that weren't there. And I have these really vivid deja-vus, and just intense feelings of doom and anxiety and just unexplained sadness, things that you normally wouldn't make someone feel sad. And I'd be kind of going down that road. And these are all really worrying, these episodes, I'd be good for several months, and then they'd go away, and then one would come on. So this went on from about 2003 to about 2005. Also, there was a lot of stress in my life. We were starting a new business. Had a brand new baby on the way. I had a 2.5-year-old, and then a new baby on the way, new business that wasn't doing very well. So it was a lot of stress at this time too, which I'm sure contributed. So really the key thing that if that could have been really bad. And I think that when you look back at it, if you were to see something like this and you're experiencing any of these kind of early signs of epilepsy, just God, get in and see a neurologist. Because it's a little hard for me to talk about right now, but on the 5th, September of 2005, I almost died from this. And I can tell you what happened that day. I was feeling fatigue, and I was up early that morning and doing payroll for the business, and I just felt really tired. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm just gonna. I remember the last things I thought were, I'm just going to, and then I would have finished the sentence with, put my head down and rest. But then I passed out, and I don't know how long I was out, but I remember when I came to, that my head was down on the table, and I was looking across with my head down on the table, and I saw that I knocked over water. There's water all over the table, and I was hearing a, and it was my head was on the keyboard, and it was just, chiming away keystrokes. And then I woke up, and I didn't say anything to anybody, and I'm not quite sure why. I just kind of sucked it up. I think that's kind of this, I don't know why people do this, but they do. When something's going bad, you kind of turn away, don't want other people to know it. And so I didn't share any of that with anybody. And I knew, like, the rest of the day I was really tired. And then the afternoon, I was going to play music with friends, and I really didn't want to miss out on that. And I felt like maybe I was just low blood sugar. My parents have diabetes, so I thought, maybe it's low blood sugar, and I'll check in with the doctor, on Monday and look into that. And then I went to play music with my friends that night, and still wasn't feeling very well. And then another friend there lit up a cigarette, and again, it was this instant kind of association, the smell, just this triggered this doom. And then next thing I know, I passed out, and I hit my head on a drummer's cymbal and kind of cut open my right above my eyebrow, and I was bleeding all over the place. And my friend was just really concerned. He was kind of freaked out, and I was just kind of a little bit, woozy. And then he took me into urgent care facility. And I remember sitting in the waiting room there, and I think I threw up in their wastebasket or something like that. And then I went in to see the doctor, and he couldn't find anything wrong with me. So he stitched up my eye, and he said, we don't know what it is. Why don't you go home and get some rest? And kind of almost dismissive. And so I'm like, okay, well, and then by that point I was feeling better. So they called my wife, and she came to pick me up. And while I was waiting, I had a grand mal seizure right there in the lobby of the urgent care place. And I know they got the AEDAs out, and they were, trying to get me up and going. And I know that at one point I was, my heart stopped for about 30 seconds to a minute or so while they're trying to get me up and going. I don't have a very good memory of this because things were kind of fading in and out. I remember they had me set up on pads, and they put me in an ambulance. They realized they couldn't deal with me there in the small town, and so they drove me to another larger town with a cardiologist. There's some maybe more details than you need, so you can fast forward through some of the stuff if you don't want to, but if the story's intriguing, I'll keep telling it. Well, I'm going to keep telling it. So they rushed me off to an ambulance, off to another town, and all I remember was just the intense, pacing that they were doing with me. And then they injected a catheter in my neck. I remember at that point, I just way came to. It was so painful. And then what they're doing was throwing in electrodes to externally pace me. They got me to the hospital, and they got me stabilized. And the cardiologists, they were looking through my heart and doing all the monitoring, and they couldn't find anything wrong. And they were like, well, we don't know what's wrong. Your brain's telling your heart to stop. We don't know why it's doing that.